Hello and welcome to What the Foe Travel Podcast. I'm James Belsey from the Bottomless Pit podcast, and for this month, I'm leading this mini episode about free walking tours.
I know what you're thinking. Who the hell is this guy?
So this month, James Belsey from the Bottomless Pit podcast is taking over What the Foe to interview us about our favourite topic in the world, walking tours.
Yeah, we love a walking tour, don't we?
Yes, we bloody do. But before we get into our chat, some housekeeping.
Sponsor!
This episode is sponsored by Storyteller, the travel accessories company that helps provide access to a quality education for individuals in less privileged areas of the world.
Right, so let's crack on. First by giving a shout out to these legends who have jumped on board the Patreon train.
The train of life. The old dusty road.
The old just dusty trail. Choo-choo
The
train.
old Patreon pay road.
Patreon bandwagon. First up, Melanie Haynes. Now, we've spoken to Melanie many times before, and she's now on board as a patron. Thank you so much. But I think it's worth mentioning to you guys what Melanie does. She actually makes some really cool bespoke guides to Copenhagen, where she lives. She's actually from England, but she lives in Copenhagen, so she can see the city from an outsider's point of view, if you like. So if you're into arts, she's got a guide for that. If you're into history, she's got a guide for that. So if you just Google Copenhagen Guide, Melanie Haynes, you'll find her website. Anyway, she's a patron, as well as Heath Hudgens, Ryan Sanim, good old Ryan. We've heard from Ryan for bloody years.
Absolute lad.
He's now on board as a patron. And Chris Marshall. All of you guys, what can I say? You are really supporting us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, honestly, you've blown us away. Like, if you could see us when we, like, an email comes through saying that you've, like, come on board, it's amazing. And it literally blows us away. Like, we can't believe it. So
well, not literally.
Okay, well, you hate when people say that, don't you?
Yeah.
What should I say then?
It metaphorically.
It metaphorically blows me away.
And finally, I'm going to mention something which I think is very relevant to the show and people listening. On our travels, as everyone knows, we're travelling. We're currently recording this in our hotel room in Alexandria in Egypt. And spoiler alert, Egypt's a bit hard work sometimes, isn't it?
A little bit. I mean, I, myself, would compare it to Cuba.
Oh my God. That's something for you guys to look forward to when we talk about Egypt on the show. Anyway, on our travels so far, I've been reading this really good book called The Kindness of Strangers, and it's exactly what we're all about. It's a book full of travel stories about people that have been helped out by complete strangers. Stuff that, restores your faith in humanity. But that is what we're all about, really, because the world is not this big, scary place that the media want you to think it is. So I've been really enjoying it. I think you guys would. So that's The Kindness of Strangers, edited by Fergal O'Nullen.
Now all the house cleaning is done, let's kick off with the episode.
Housekeeping.
What did I say?
House cleaning.
Did I? Yeah. Now that the housekeeping is all done, let's kick off with the episode.
We'll start by talking about how many walking tours we've all sort of done. I counted before we started recording. I've done about 12. Do you guys have an idea about how many you've done?
12. Yeah. It's kind of a thing that we do every time we go travelling. Yeah, when we're researching something, it's kind of the first thing we look at. Does this place have a free walking tour? It's such a great way when you're travelling. But yeah, how many have we done?
Yeah, I don't know top of my head, but I reckon it's probably more than that. Yeah, 20 or something, because there's loads all over Europe that are very popular, but we've done loads in South America as well, haven't we? So, yeah, maybe 20, 25. Yeah, we're big fans.
I mean, they're great. We should probably start by talking about what a free walking tour is. I know that on the Bottomless Pit podcast, we've mentioned them in passing, me and Foley, that we've done them in various cities, and we've kind of briefly touched upon them. And likewise in your guys' podcast, you've talked about them. You have recordings of you on the tours, but let's go in depth about what they are. So let's start really basic and say, what is a free walking tour?
Yeah, so a free walking tour, you can find them on a website. They tell you where to meet, and you'll meet at a certain time. And there's normally quite a big group, and I'm talking at least 20 people. And it's free because you don't have to pay for it. But it's custom that you give them a tip at the end. And they'll tell you that at the start. And I always find, because that's kind of like the worst thing for me, talking about money. And I'd be really embarrassed if I was the tour guide. But they do it in such a polite way. They say, if you enjoy what we've done today, then you can give us a tip. Sometimes they give you guidance on how much to give, and they normally say, oh, if you did a tour of this length here in this city, it would normally cost you so and so. So you can kind of give what you want though. So you could actually just give a penny if you wanted. Well, obviously that would be a bit rude and kind of you'd rather just give nothing, but yeah, that's kind of the basic concept.
But what I think is quite nice is, so the guide really are, they're working for their money, so they want to do a good job to impress you, so then you're going to want to pay them. So as the customer, it's almost guaranteeing that they're going to put the effort in. It's not someone that you've already paid and they can just do, half-assed job and then they still get the same money. They're really working for their money, which normally means they put in a lot of effort. In our experience, they've always been very good tours. And at the end, I'm happy to pay what I think the tour guide deserves, what I think it's worth.
And another way of looking at it as well is that it doesn't have to be what you think it's worth. I mean, you can think it's worth really like a lot of money, but if you just can't afford it, if you, for whatever reason, if you just don't have the money to spend to give on 30 euros or £30 on a tour, say, but you still want to have the experience of traveling around that place, you can give a fiver, and it's not a thing where you get judged by how much you give. And it's, some people say it's advertise it as give what you think the tour is worth, but some people advertise it as give what you can afford. It is really for travelers of all kind of budgets and backgrounds.
That's a really good point. Yeah, like you said with the fiver, the tour guide would rather have your fiver than have none of your money. So yeah, if it's a difference between you going on the tour or thinking, maybe I won't because I can't give them 20 quid, they'd rather you go on the tour and just give them that fiver. Like I said, they'd rather have that than nothing at all.
What's your opinions about the types of free walking tours that are run by a company? Like, you get certain companies that do free walking tours in lots of cities across the world, and so they have their guides working for them somehow, but the guides are working for tips, and it's kind of weird. And then sometimes you'll get free walking tours that are, it's just this person, this student, for a lot of the time, just as a way to make money. They're from this city, they love their city, they want to show tourists around it. What do you think about the use of companies in that?
Now, I want to say that we only go to, the little independent companies, but the truth is, the best walking tour I ever went on was in Berlin, and it was run by Sanderman, I don't know how to pronounce it, Sanderman's Tours, and they are a big, almost worldwide like tour company. This is what they do. They're free walking tours in all countries around the world. And that was actually a really, really good tour. The tour guide was great. I'm not sure if it's just because we're in Berlin and there was so much to learn. Like, if you like your history, then, I mean, before we started traveling a few years ago, I wasn't really a history buff, but going to these places and seeing them and learning the history, I find really fascinating. And Berlin, there's so much to see there. So maybe that's what it was, but I found that the experience with this big company was actually really, really good.
What made that particular tour so good that made it stick out in your mind?
Well, yeah, I think it was just the material the tour guide had to work with, because we were in Berlin. So much history, so much stuff has happened there, which I found really interesting. But the tour guide herself, she was very good, because this was actually, I'm talking to Amy now, I've been to Berlin twice, once with you and once on my own. Well, I say on my own. I was actually with a stag group for American listeners, a bachelor party. And I woke up at like 8 a.m. after quite a big night out, but I don't really sleep much when I drink. And I suggested to all the guys, I said, look, we've got nothing going on for most of the day. Midday, there's a free walking tour going on. And they all looked at me as if I was a sex offender. They were like, what? Why would we want to go on a walking tour? And I think they got a bad reputation. It sounds like something your nan and granddad would do when they go away. So I went on my own. There was like 12 other blokes that all just stayed in bed, and they just sat around the hotel not doing anything. And I had 2 hours walking around Berlin learning all this history. And I think, I paid maybe like 5-10 euros, something like that. And I had a great experience. So in my opinion, they missed out.
That is funny what you said about the attitudes that like friends have, because in my group of friends, I'm just kind of tucking the idea of free walking tours in, because we go on holiday once a year to a different country, into a new city every year. And I've never done a free walking tour with those guys because we don't go there for that reason necessarily. But I love doing them. And it's something that I went to Poland last year, but I arrived a couple of days early because I was flying from a different airport to the others, and I came with one of the guys, and I convinced him to go on a free walking tour, and he loved it. And so now for Bulgaria, where we're going to next month, and we'll talk about that on the podcast once I'm back, I've now got sort of a partner in crime who can try and help convince the others to go on
That's
these
good.
walking tours. But what about you, Amy? Do you have one that sticks out in your mind particularly?
Yeah, can I just go back to the question
Sure.
that you were saying earlier? So, what we think about these big companies. I think I wouldn't really be able to make an opinion on it until I'd worked for one of them. Because I'm interested to know, you give €10 tip, and then, how much goes to the actual tour guide?
Yeah.
How much goes to Sandeman's, for example? So I think that'd be really interesting. And it's something that we will probably be doing because we're about to go on a trip. We're quitting our jobs in a month's time and going away. And especially for Nick, it's something that you've always wanted to do. I think you'll be a really good tour guide, and you can test your tour out on me before you do a proper one. But I think it'd be interesting to see what it's like from the other side with working with them. Also, going back to the reputation of them as well. So I remember the first time Nick gave me the idea of going. We were going to Budapest with our friends for Ziget Festival, which is a really massive festival on an island in Budapest. Really cool, loads of big artists there, music festival. And we're going with our group of friends. And I remember one day we was in the car here in England driving somewhere to sort something out for Budapest. And Nick was like, hey guys, why don't we go to a free walking tour? And kind of in our group of friends, you were known as the old man, really, aren't you? Because you got like old traditional kind of values. I don't know.
Yeah.
You're just very old interests. And I was so embarrassed because I'd never been on one before. And I just thought, Nick, why are you embarrassing me again in front of our friends? Just stop it. But we went on one. And I just absolutely love it. Yeah. They're so good. You learn so much about the culture, the food. You get good tips of good restaurants to go to. It just heightens your trip. And I love it.
Yeah, I completely agree. The tips you get on it, just if you do it on the first day or two that you're in a new city, in a new country, it does. It shows you all the key places, all the best places. But at the same time, if you see something you don't like, you know to avoid it. And then you can just spend the rest of your holiday doing exactly what it is you want to do. It's really, really cool.
My tip would be, first thing you do, when you get to a new city, do the walking tour. You'll learn lots of stuff, like you said. And then at the end of the tour, ask the tour guide some questions. So, like, while I'm here, I want to see this as well. This thing that I've come to see wasn't on the tour, but how do I go see that? And they'll know because they're locals themselves. So, good tip. First thing to do when you're in a new place, go on a walking tour. We actually, do you remember we spent a few days in Madrid and we didn't like it. We had quite a bad time. We're thinking, Madrid's really boring. I'm never going to go back. But this was before we knew about free walking tours. I think if we'd have done a free walking tour, got our bearings, got some good tips about Madrid, I think we would have loved it.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that.
So you mentioned about asking the tour guide some questions as well there. And it is, I think every one I've been on, it's the case that they do their kind of summarizing piece, whatever it is they're concluding the tour, blah, blah, blah. And they do say, well, I'm going to stick around for the next 5-10 minutes if anyone wants to know where they want to go next. If you don't know where you are in the city right now or want any advice, any tips, any extra stuff, they're always hanging about. And the one time I was in Poland last year on one of the tours I did there, and the guy forgot to ask for the money part of it at the end. He was genuinely doing it for the love of it. He had his bag that he had with him that he would collect money with at the end. He ended the tour and then just said, yeah, I'm here if you guys want to ask any questions. And he just kind of stopped and there was a pause and then he went, oh yeah, and then here's a bag. And he just put the bag on the wall, walked away from the bag so he could just let people put whatever they wanted in without feeling, I guess, if they feel a bit guilty because it's not quite as much as other people are giving or whatever it is, which I thought was really, really cool because not only was it clearly not about the money for him, he just loved what he was doing, and that was the only one of those tours that I've done where that was the case, where it was really obvious that he didn't really care about the money. I mean, he forgot to ask for the money, and it's not that all the others are trying to grab your money off you at all, because that's not the case, but that one really sticks out in my mind.
Yeah, that is funny that he was so busy just looking after you guys. He didn't even think that he's in it for the money. No, I like that. One walking tour I just wanted to quickly mention, or actually two. One was in Cologne in Germany, and and they were a bit different, this tour group. Basically their motto was, this is how we do it, if you don't like it, F you, kind of thing. Like, that's their motto for the walking tour. That's just one that stands out. But that was an interesting one. It was good. Learned a lot about Cologne.
And also on that, it was a bit different where he took you down the streets and said, okay, if you like this type of music, you can party down here. If you like this type of music, party down here. Because especially in Germany, I find there's so many diehard fans of each music group, and what you can really tailor make your night and kind of go where you want to go. So yeah, that stuck out for me on that Cologne one.
Second one that stuck out, I don't know whether people were going to think we're really sad for doing this, but we did a walking tour in London, like effectively our hometown, really. I mean, we live a little bit outside London, so we were tourists for the day. But how much did we learn? It was really good. And the tour guide, it's funny coming from English people, learning about English history. The tour guide was German. His English history was spot on. And the reason why it's quite funny, you know, because our histories are so intertwined, you know, we've been enemies and friends. But his English history was spot on, and he was really funny. He was like a performer.
I think it's funny that you say that you did one in London. You're kind of laughing about it as if like, oh, that's kind of silly doing it on your own doorstep. But that is something I've been thinking I want to do myself. I do want to go to London because I don't know about how you guys were for your school time here, but up where I'm from, we don't really learn about anything other than World War II in history class. And so I don't know a lot about English history, to be fair. And I feel that going on walking tours in any of the big cities would be valuable, you know? We've spoken, obviously, a couple of times about the Berlin one that clearly stands out in your mind. Is there any that stands out particularly for you, Amy?
Yeah, I'd say Sao Paulo. The reason I really liked these guys was because it was even more like a tour company where you can go on their website and they tailor make each tour. So it's not just a general one. So you can go for a history tour, you can go on an art tour, and things like that. And we actually chose an art one, which probably something that Nick wouldn't have normally done. But the art scene in Sao Paulo is particularly different because they have a place called Batman Alley, which it's just graffiti, this whole alley full of graffiti, and it's kind of spread across the city a bit more now, and it was just really, really interesting. So I've studied art, I did photography at uni, I've always been studying art, so it was really interesting for me, but I think, Nick, you were really surprised how good it was.
The graffiti tour around Sao Paulo, I really enjoyed it, and they also threw in a bit of history and culture as well, so you learnt about Brazil and Sao Paulo as well. It just wasn't history heavy, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was great.
You've done a tour of a favela in Rio as well, haven't you? Was that a free walking tour as well?
It wasn't free. That's one you had to pay for before. But yeah, that was fantastic, really, because of where we were in the favela. The tour guide was great, and we were expecting this Brazilian local tour guide, and we're waiting by this train station where they say to meet you, and this guy came up to us and we're thinking, this can't be the tour guide. It was a guy from England, from Cornwall, and he lives in the favela. And I just said to him, I was not expecting to see you here, but he was a fantastic tour guide, but he was like a local, spoke Portuguese, he knew everyone in the favela. But no, it wasn't a free walking tour. No,
okay, fair enough. But like, so you've spoken there about the graffiti tour, which was it was a tour for specifically the art of Sao Paulo. And we should mention that as well, that a free walking tour doesn't just mean a tour of a city. It can just be to get your bearings, absolutely, like what you said about Budapest and things like that, and I've done plenty of them as well. But they do have sometimes specific themes. Like, I've done one in Berlin too, but it was specifically for World War II history. Because I've been to Berlin plenty of times, I've done the touristy things, I know my way around, so I didn't feel like I needed to do a tour of the city as such. But just doing a specific World War II tour was something that was very interesting to me. And so if you do Google free walking tours in whichever city, it will come up with a list of stuff. And there's usually different themed ones as well, which I find is really cool. Like, for example, in Edinburgh, there's a Harry Potter one because Edinburgh's so intermixed with Harry Potter.
That's amazing. As we're talking about Berlin so much, that was probably one of my favourite as well. A particular part I remember was we were by the Berlin Wall, and that's a place that obviously it's not a museum. Anyone can walk up to it, but you're not necessarily going to get any information from it just by looking at it. And our tour guide was telling us the most amazing story about how this father, he was stuck on the east side and he wanted to go from the east to the west. So he actually built himself a hot air balloon to transport his family over the wall. And that just blew my mind. And we learnt about other stories where a man put effectively like a zip line and had a basket in it for them to carry their passports and everything. And they had young children, they had a baby, so they put the baby in the basket and sent the baby across first, because the guards down the bottom wouldn't have seen the baby. I think they finally got the baby across and all of themselves, but I believe their papers were dropped.
That's it. The dad, like the man of the family, was the last one to go across, and as he was going across the wall, dropped all of his papers. So, the key thing is he got to the other side and he was fine, but everyone, the authorities on the east, they had his identity. They knew exactly who he was, how he'd escaped, but he was actually able to live in the west side of Berlin happily. But yeah, there's some incredible stories which you'd expect from like a James Bond film. But these are real life things that really happened.
And that's the perfect thing, because the Berlin Wall, everyone knows the Berlin Wall. And if you go to Berlin, whether you do a tour or not, it's pretty hard to miss. You're going to see it. And plenty of tourists will go there. They'll just see the Berlin Wall, take pictures of it. But unless you do a tour, you don't get those little stories. And those are the things that I think make it any city so fascinating, because you're hearing these stories in the place that it actually happened. I think that's excellent.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And that's what kind of boosts it from a history lesson at school. I think earlier when we weren't recording, I was explaining that in school, my history teacher would always get us up, give us a character, and we would be playing out whatever we're learning about. And that's so good for not only children's brains, but adults' brains as well. And I think that's the great thing about walking tours, free walking tours, is that you can be in the place as it's happening. Again, another thing on the Berlin tour is we went to the car park where Hitler died. So, and you kind of walk into this dead car park. There's a few cars there, but you just feel different, and you feel a bit eerie, and you don't know what's about to happen, what they're about to tell you. But then as soon as they tell you beneath this was the bunker that he died in, it all makes sense. It's just really eerie there. And I know you can pay for tours, or paid tours, and find this sort of thing out, but I don't know, I think free walking tours are a lot more genuine, and like Nick said earlier, they're always going to be working their best to make sure you have a good tour, because it's tip based.
And because they're free tours, they're the most popular. They're the busiest. Yeah. So you're also going to meet other travellers.
Yeah. And we should say as well, if you're not a native English speaker, they do most of the time, I've seen at least Spanish and German probably as well. So it's really international. It is for everyone. Now, you've said about the free walking tours, one of the best things about them is that the guides are trying to do their absolute best tour for you, because their performance essentially directly correlates to how much they're going to get, how much they're going to earn that day. But have you had any bad experiences on free walking tours?
There's been a couple that just haven't really been up to par. Well, one in Cuba was actually really bad. It just wasn't very well planned out, and we wanted to learn about the Cuban Revolution, and so we did a Cuban Revolution walking tour. But I just got the impression that in order to understand what the guide was talking about, you had to have some base knowledge. And we didn't. We didn't know anything about it really. Something to do with America or the missile crisis or something. We didn't really Che Guevara. We didn't really know anything about it. But he didn't really explain it very well. So that was a disappointing one. And Reykjavik wasn't very good. That's just because Reykjavik's really boring. That's my opinion.
Well, actually, for both of them, I think the free walking tour correlates to how bad our trip was in both places. So the reason that the Cuban free walking tour wasn't very good was because he wasn't allowed to tell us anything.
Wow.
And because they're pushed down and oppressed, they're not allowed to tell us. So there were certain times where he said, okay, I'll tell you this, but I'm not really allowed to. And specifically, he wouldn't record anything with us. And I get that. Well, he would have been in deep trouble with the government, and who knows what would have happened to him. We don't know how the Cuban government is working. I'm not saying they would do anything bad, but he was scared.
Yeah.
He was scared to tell us anything. And then also in Reykjavik in Iceland, it was boring. It was boring the same as the country. And I know a lot of people go, oh my God, how can you say Iceland's boring? Yes, we love the Blue Lagoon. Yes, there's some great landscapes there. But Reykjavik as a city is one of the most boring places. There's nothing to see. I mean, on the walking tour, he was telling us about a road sign. And it looks the same as a road sign you would see here in the UK or anywhere else. But his story to it was that any couple that has a photograph together with the sign will split up. So we had a photo, but we did it separately. So I was in one, you was in another, and we put it in a collage. But I think it was because Angelina and Brad had just split up and they'd had a photo by this. But they were kind of making their own news and making their own history to make it interesting. And yeah, we had a laugh, but they couldn't show us anything.
Yeah. And actually, the only real landscape or tourist attraction in Reykjavik. If you see the picture, then you'll know straight away exactly what I'm talking about. It's like a church, it looks like a waterfall. But if you see the picture, I'm sure you'll be like, oh yeah, I've seen that before. And the walking tour didn't even go there, did it? So it was rubbish, mate. But most of the time, they're a really good experience walking tours. But even if they are rubbish, then just don't tip much. You know, you've got nothing to lose. If something's free, you can't really complain about the quality.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think it's hilarious that you guys are so honest about these things, because on your podcast, those 2 episodes about Iceland and Cuba are so funny. Because those are places that, when you think of them, at least, the images in your head, you think it's going to be this incredible, well, Cuba, vibrant, dancing, partying place, and Iceland, it's the land of ice and fire, it's super exciting and all that kind of stuff, and you hear so many great things, and then you guys do the episode and you're honest about it. You didn't happen to have great time when you were there.
Yeah, I think it's to do with expectation. These are both big tourist destinations, and people always bang on about how great they are. So I think we were going thinking this is going to be amazing, and it wasn't. But we have to be honest on our show. If we made a podcast saying we went to this place, it was great, we went to this place, it was great, that's boring, isn't it? If we just said everywhere's good. But at least if we're honest and say when somewhere's bad, when we say somewhere's good, you know we mean it.
Yeah, and I think what's the worst that's going to happen? There's now a Cuban company that's not going to want to work with us in the future. But to be quite honest, I feel more passionate about telling people right information, or my opinion. I'm not like, obviously there's people that have been to Cuba and have loved it, and that's great, and I'm really happy that they have. But it's all, and it's kind of, when I talk to people, if they loved Cuba, I've got 2 questions for them. So do you travel much? And B, where did you stay? Did you stay in an all-inclusive 7-star resort? Because that's going to be fantastic. I would love it as well. That's what we did in the Maldives, because it was our honeymoon, and loved it. But I know for a fact it would have been a completely different story if we went to the capital, Male, and it would have been completely different. But we were in a 5-star resort, so it was incredible. But you need to understand where that opinion is coming from, that tourism. Are you coming from a hotel or a local person's house? In Cuba, we were staying in a local person's house, and we were just being raped of our money, to be quite honest.
And what have people said to you then when you've asked them those questions, that, you know, do you travel much and were you staying in a resort? What have the answers been to those?
Oh, every time it's like, oh, my uncle loved Cuba. Oh yeah, he was in this resort, and like, he never left the resort. Every single time. The only time we've met a couple who also hated Cuba, they were backpacking it, same as us.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, it's always people who stayed in these nice places, and they're like, oh, the locals who kept bringing me drinks are so friendly. Of course they are. They're working there and they want tips.
Yeah, and actually, we've also met quite a lot of people who were staying in the resorts and also hated it, because as soon as you step out that front door of your hotel, you're attacked, and it's just it's not nice. And that was another reason why we went to the free walking tour. We would have anyway, but it's a really good way to get a grounding and understanding of their culture. If somebody's coming up to you, what's the best thing to do? What's the best thing to say? Is this normal if someone's asking me to do this, or is this a scam, and things like that? Yeah, so I think it made me feel safer going to the free walking tour in Cuba as well. That was an extra added benefit, although we didn't really learn much. But yeah, I felt a bit safer being with a local person, and we weren't harassed. But as soon as you walk through that street by yourself, you're harassed to an unbelievable amount.
Yeah, so in countries where that's kind of the thing, whether it's because, you know, you don't get many white people there, you know, you hear of places like in China, for example, where you might get stopped every few seconds just because they've never seen a white person before and they want to have their photo taken with you and things like that. It's just a way of getting around to see the city without that hassle as well. I'd never thought about that before. We've talked about the free walking tours being all sorts of different things, whether it's a general tour or a tour about a specific theme. Now, I've been on some tours where you do like activities along them as well. Like, for example, I did one in Cusco in Peru where we had a free lesson on how to make pisco sour, which is like the local cocktail. And we got a free bus ride up to the top of the hill for an amazing panoramic view across the city and everything. And we went to a weaving place where they took the alpaca wool and made all the clothes, showed you how they dyed the wool and how they made all the clothes. That was all free as part of this free walking tour. Wow. In fact, we also visited the house of this musician, or rather an instrument maker, who makes these various Peruvian traditional instruments out of his living room and sells them to people. I bought some homemade panpipes for the equivalent of £2.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Have you guys had anything like that where you've had like a little activity on your free tours?
We've had free walking tours where, we've done some extra stuff. In Cordoba in Argentina, we had a little dance lesson, which was good. And on that same tour, the tour guide took us to some little like sweet shops, like food shops, so we can have little tasters. And that we didn't pay anything for that. It was just a taster. Then if you liked it, you'd obviously buy the real thing. We could also try a bit of their local drink, Fernet. It's like an alcoholic / medicine drink, which is interesting. So that jumps to mind straight away. But I don't think we've been on any others where there was like some real extra activities.
Yeah, no, I think everything that Nick's mentioned, the first thing that jumped to mind was the dance class. So we learned a dance that was very similar to merengue, if anyone knows their dance. So that was quite fun. And we were just in the middle of the street. We was in a big circle. We were all paired up. And she teaches you how to kind of turn the woman. And yeah, it was quite fun.
Just on the street, just with people walking down the street watching you do this
yeah, and all
dancing.
the locals were kind of laughing as they were walking past. I was there filming just so that I could get it on our Instagram. But yeah, no, it was really good.
Amazing. And we haven't actually mentioned how long these tours are, and it obviously varies depending on the city and the tour guide and what the theme of the tour is. But I don't know what your experience is. I've always found kind of between an hour and a half and maybe even up to 3 hours sometimes. What have you guys had?
Yeah, I think the norm is 2 hours. We've been on ones that have been 3 hours. They have a break in the middle.
Yeah.
But once the 3 hours are done, you are exhausted. I think that's probably a bit too much. So yeah, I'd say 2 hours is the norm.
And well worth doing, I think you guys agree. It should be a staple for most trips. Personally, I'd try to make it a staple.
Yeah, people don't know they're missing out. People who've even never heard of them or think, like we said earlier, it sounds like something my nan would do. But honestly, those people are missing out. Don't forget, you can get in touch with the show. You can email us at whatthefopodcast@gmail.com. We are also on all the social medias, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. And we are also on Patreon. For more information on all those things, you can go to our website at www.whatthefoptravelpodcast.com.